All right, okay, joining us now to discuss the situation in Rivers State and other political issues, the Director, I beg your pardon, Abuja School of Social and Political Thoughts, Dr. Sam Amadi, and of course, Arise Director of News and Politics Editor, Sumner Sambo. Interesting times in Nigeria's politics. Just about 48 hours from now, we'll see what happens in Rivers State in southern Nigeria. Dr. Amadi, what's your thoughts watching the back and forth playing out over the coming Rivers grassroots elections?
I think it would have been comical, if it wasn't slightly tragic in terms of how the judiciary has been abused, thoroughly abused in this process. All the parties, everything they're doing, they're intentional, it's laughable, they know what they're doing, playing ping pong. Now, what is clear here is that the Supreme Court gave an order, basically confirming what we know. The Constitution says that all elected local government should be elected, local government to get elected, and the directives to the effect that that should be done. And part of the process is that by this month, all local governments should have elected officials. Now, let's forget about the quality of elections. We've had about 10, and each of them very flawed election. So, but the point is democratic election. Again, the High Court of Rivers State issues instruction, also an order directing that elections should hold October 5th. And now we got another order from the Federal High Court here, nullifying that and restraining INEC. Now, a couple of things. The Supreme Court judgment under section 2871, all persons, all courts, all institutions should comply with them. And again, this is the doctrine of judicial supremacy. It's not just between the parties who went to court. It's addressed to everybody. That the person who declares the law in terms of the Constitution is the Supreme Court. Starting way back with Daniel Webster in the U.S., constitutional law, of course, people like Robert Jackson, who made it clear. But the point is, even in our own Constitution, Oputa, who says the Supreme Court is final not because it's infallible, because it's final, echoing Justice Robert Jackson. Now, so the point then is, why should 2 points? One is, why are we always getting these contra orders from the federal territory, the Federal High Court? That's number one. Two, under some more important, more rigorous judicial approach, if a party comes to you, by the way, the Electoral Act contains a provision that says that no court should issue instruction to stop INEC conducting election. So I would argue, subsequent, following from that courts should be reluctant to issue instructions stopping any state electoral commission from carrying election based on that principle. Why is this so? Because any illegality can be contested post-election, but you want elections have timelines that are sensitive. So I would assume that the judge in Federal Court Abuja here, even if there was facts before him, he could actually call in the opposition. It shouldn't be expertise. It should be given, without notice, and say, okay, come tomorrow and tell me why. And then, so we are now in a position where it looks like two high court decisions are conflicting. And of course, the court in High Court and the court in Abuja here are coordinating jurisdiction. So the first loser here is the court. And I think the Chief Justice, who has talked so much about discipline, should know where to focus. It's not about those who write on social media. The real culprits here are the judges themselves who are allowing politics expose the court. Now, we're going to go to a point where judicial supremacy will be lost because there will be political backlash.
Well, is it not lost already?
That's the point.
Let me bring in Sumner Sambo. Interesting developments in Rivers State. Number one, you have a PDP loyal to Wike aligning with the APC that pulled out of this October 5 election. And on the other hand, you have Fubara, the sitting governor, saying no amount of propaganda, no amount of blackmail will stop the October 5 election from going on. What do you think is playing out here? Because where you have both PDP and APC on the same page, that's quite strange. What is likely to happen?
Yeah, thank you so much, Ngozi, and a very warm evening to our viewers. Well, it's all about political supremacy, and you would have seen that what's happening in Rivers State is actually the Constitution, being put to test. We say we are running a federalism. Sometimes you wonder what exactly is going on with our own form of federalism. And just like Dr. Sam Amadi has said, there seems to be a contradiction in what's happening in our courts. So why does it look like the state courts seem to be backing the state government, and then the federal courts seem to be backing, making judgments that actually seem to be backing former Governor Nyesom Wike? So does it look like the politicians are beginning to penetrate with the content of the judiciary, just like it's been assumed in several public spaces? Well, this is being put to test, and I think the Attorney General of the Federation needs to quickly intervene alongside the Chief Justice of Nigeria to actually see that the judiciary is sanitized. Well, while political supremacy is being put to display here in Rivers State, I'll say that the Governor Fubara is simply trying to do what other governors are doing. You would have seen that in Anambra, in other states, most of the state governments are just putting their foot on the ground, especially the governors, and ensuring that all their candidates actually sweep elections. Look at the recent Enugu elections, is also there. And then, of course, in other states that we've seen, both APC, PDP, ABGA, all political parties that are governing in several states are ensuring that all their candidates actually win these elections and sweep all the polls down to the councillorship positions. And this begins to question the kind of federalism that we're running. And this has also brought to the fore the fears that people have about state police. That is the same thing that's going to happen when you eventually have state police. Almost everybody within the institution will be at the, beck and call of the state governor. So institutions are not functioning very well. Now, politically, what seems to be happening is that Governor Fubara's men all moved from the PDP into the APP, the Action People's Party, which was founded coincidentally by Honorable Ikenga Ogochinyere, who is a member of the People's Democratic Party and currently sitting as a serving member of the House of Representatives. And so it looks like there's a political partnership between him and the governor to actually see that all his party's candidates actually sweep the polls on Saturday's election. So Governor Fubara just wants to replicate what has been happening ahead of the October 15 deadline, which makes it clear that all states where we do not have elections conducted at the local government levels won't be able to access the federal posts, the federal allocations. And so he's in a rush to ensure that the election not only holds, despite the contradictory judgment that we have in both the state and federal courts, but to ensure that all his candidates contesting in the APP actually win. But don't forget, there's also a fresh order that has come to say that in the Action People's Party itself in Rivers State, APP, most of his men who are basically the caretaker committee chairmen that he put in place after dissolving the other elected local government and councillorship positions are actually battling for the chairmanship of the state chairmanship position of the All People's Party itself. Okay. So will the courts also stop all the APP candidates that just got in there when the state chairmanship is being contested, and there's a court order that has said that, this current state chairman is not the correct state chairman to be there. So Governor Fubara has a lot of battles to actually fight if eventually his men win the elections.
Okay, let me come in here. We'll come back to you. Just hold your thoughts there. And the Labour Party caucus in the National Assembly has expressed grave displeasure over ongoing moves by Governor Charles Soludo of Anambra State to enact joint state and local government joint account law to circumvent the landmark judgment delivered by the Supreme Court on local government financial autonomy. The caucus, led by Senator Tony Woye, tasked the Speaker and members of the Anambra State House of Assembly to toe the path of honor by stopping further consideration of the executive bill. The federal lawmakers argued that the provisions of the proposed bill currently at the committee stage are subservient to the landmark Supreme Court ruling and the Nigerian Constitution.
Why we're here is to tell the whole world that Anambra State, that is witnessing the highest level of insecurity in Nigeria as of today, Anambra State, the only state in Nigeria that has existed for 10 years without democratically elected people at the last tier of government, third tier that is close to the people. Now, because of the Supreme Court judgment, now what my governor and his party, what they want to do is now to further siphon Anambra State government money coming from federation account, money meant for the development of the grassroots. He has now come back to the back door to now bring obnoxious criminal law tagged Anambra State Local Government Administration Law 2024. He has smuggled into the House of Assembly 2 days ago. Now, as we're talking, the law is at the committee stage. Present a report by next week. What is the law talking about?
There you go. Right.
Well, interesting times. And this is the best time for us to have this conversation, Dr. Amadi. We just got a new Chief Justice of Nigeria, and some of the key concerns were, look, Madam CJN, you need to look at frivolous court judgments, and you also need to look at how politicians try to infiltrate the judiciary. Help us here. Now, listening to Tony Nwoye, that's in Southeast, and we also have almost a similar case in the south of Rivers State. What do you think could be the solution, perhaps now that it looks like they're now ditching our constitution to forge ahead with their political interest?
Well, I think this is a very complex one. First, this is in the other issue we had two contradictory constitutions. Now we have a legislative, if you like, a revocation of judicial decision. So we've seen that maybe during the days of in the First Republic, when the Supreme Court then ruled in the case of Lake Communion State about the power of the then military government to interdict a citizen without due process. And then they went back to the Parliament went back to assert itself by nullifying through legislative judgment that the decision, which was wrong. So here is the Supreme Court talking about direct transfers to
the local government.
And let's also put in mind that that decision of the Supreme Court sounds, in some analysis, as maybe violative or even diverted away from the constitutional provision. The Constitution talks about a joint account between state and local government. And so the Supreme Court made a decision, in my considered view sometimes, maybe didn't think about the constitutional provision explicitly. Now, Governor Soludo might be saying that the Constitution requires the states to open a joint account. And using the instrument of State Assembly, which the Constitution said that the law, the management of the management of the local government should be by law made by the House of Assembly. So Soludo might argue that the State Assembly has the right to make laws under the Constitution to manage and regulate the management of the National State Assembly. So now it'd be a big question. Is it a violation of the Supreme Court decision, or is it an expression of the legislative authority of the state to make laws to manage the? So we're going to get into another big political question. I seem to be that perhaps the Supreme Court's decision contributed to this crisis we're going to be in
So
now.
apparently this is going to open a new vista entirely. And Sumner, Sambo, this raises the question about the supremacy of the Supreme Court, doesn't it? I mean, Amadi is the lawyer. He would understand the legalese involved in all of this. But, you know, coming from, I mean, at face value, that Chukwuma Soludo would be coming up with this. So what does it say to you?
Well, Anambra State has an Attorney General, so the Attorney General should be should come in handy to advise the governor properly on what the correct interpretation of that Supreme Court judgment is all about. And like I said earlier, the Chief Legal Officer of the Federation, the Honorable Attorney General, Minister of Justice, should actually be worried if the Constitution is being bastardized and, you know, judgments of the courts are being misinterpreted all this way. Well, the governor may be saying that he has the wherewithal from his own thinking to actually go ahead with this. But of course, he should be asked some questions. Will this not be contradicting what the Supreme Court had ruled? And then is this not a reversal of the intent of that, case that went way up to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court ruled on it? The idea behind that judgment is actually that the local governments were being asphyxiated by the state governments. And so is the governor trying to return what the Supreme Court had removed and replaced? So, well, I understand that we run a federalism and states are trying to be independent, but we need to properly identify and define what this independence is all about before we all run ourselves into trouble and derail this democratic fourth republic that we're in. Because the interpretations of the law, interpretations of political judgments and all of that seem to be bastardized by politicians. And of recent, we are seeing state governments trying to take their own independence to a certain extent that begins to make one wonder what exactly we're running at the moment. So this begins to worry a lot of people who really want to advocate for true federalism. You can see how the state independent electoral commissions themselves are becoming tools in the hands of governors. And so people are worried if indeed the idea of federalism is to allow states to function properly and institutions within the states to replicate what the federal government is doing. How come it has become that it's only when federal institutions get involved in certain things like this INEC conducting elections, local government elections as they are being called upon to do, that's when people actually gain confidence rather than state independent electoral commissions? Well, the answer is very clear. We can see what's happening. So if this local government joint account is beginning to resurface in Anambra State, the question will now be, okay, what will now happen to the Supreme Court judgment? Does it look like the Attorney General of Anambra State is running a different country totally? And if the governor of Anambra State continues, wouldn't that make other state governors to actually go ahead? And wouldn't the case get back to the Supreme Court? And what would be the answer? So many
questions
answers,
begging for answers
and
there.
questions here.
Very quickly, Dr. Amadi, you were going to weigh in on that very
sure.
quickly.
Just
in 30
to say,
seconds.
and I agree with him. Just the key point here is that sometimes legislators have the right to make laws to circumvent the decision of the Supreme Court. It has happened in history, as long as they don't directly contravene it, because the Supreme Court ruled according to law and history of the law. So if they exercise the legislative competence and make a different law that creates a different outcome, different from the Supreme Court decision, that is not a violation of supremacy of the Constitution, because the legislative power to make laws is not destroyed by except it's contrary to the Constitution. Like I said, the Constitution is the incoherent document. It says that there are 3 tiers, but at the same time, it predicates the local government to the control of the state assembly. That's where the problem is.
Dr. Sam Amadi, Arise analyst, also a lawyer. Thank you very much for joining us. Sumner Sambo, Arise political editor.